because I don't think there's any absolute set guarantees in this world. It's a very difficult business, is what I would start with when you refer to football agents. Many people get into it. They have very different pictures of what actually takes place in the football agent business when they start out. It's a business that takes a lot of patience, a lot of time, a lot of building, which is pretty much mirrored by just about any business that you wish to engage in. It's a unique business in some senses, but it's also got commonalities and generic aspects to it with other businesses. I always say to agents starting out and existing agents, as with almost any business, you need to be very, very clear about what your market is. The African market is a very big market. Africa is a place full of fantastic athletes. These are all players that, like most of the other parts of the world, need an opportunity. Most markets around the world are export markets, Europe being the singularly largest. South America, North America, Africa, Asia, all of them have an intention and a dream to ultimately play in Europe. So we are virtually all export markets. There is some traffic that comes back in the other direction towards Asia, Australia, the MLS in North America. Ultimately, I believe this market, if it's not already. But fundamentally, the rest of us are export markets. And so we have to set up our businesses with that in mind. We're exporting talent. From an agent's perspective, to do that successfully, that involves, almost like any import-export business, that involves bringing together networks of people. Networking is key because period of time, which is guaranteed to you under whichever jurisdiction you fall under, to represent that talent. But your clients, particularly young players, have quite often very unrealistic expectations. They want to get to Europe, they want to play for big clubs a lot faster than when they're prepared to do so. So managing expectations for me is one of the key elements to being a player representative. It's managing expectations is key. FIFA Pro a few years ago, they did a study which showed that most of the very big names in football and successful footballers throughout the course of their career, they had a maximum of 2 agents. So there was a lot of loyalty built there. That was generated on the back of success by the agents. And within that study, it demonstrated that there was a lot of managing expectations successfully on the part of the agents involved in that player's career. So managing expectations is critical in terms of your clients. From there, once you have secured a client, you need networks, you need people. Generally speaking, most deals involve multiple agents, the vast majority of them. If not agents, agencies, who also have a spread of people working in multiple countries, but ultimately it requires a network, an international network, which again is similar to import-export. That's what you do in normal business with import-export. So building a network is a very, very critical part to what you do. That's not always so easy. And certainly with agents starting out or younger agents in the infancy of their business, that becomes difficult because they find a huge amount of problems in trying to establish that network, which is understandable. And that's why I referenced at the beginning that this is very much a patience, medium to long-term game. But networks are what effectively, that's what allows you to sell your clients upwards, up the chain. If you have a talented player, you're going to probably need help to get that player to Europe if you don't reside there. You're going to need expertise on the ground. You're going to need advice on the ground, even in logistical things, like a player setting up bank accounts, getting mobile phones. Sometimes a player doesn't speak the language of the country that they're ending up in. And that's where localized agents can always help you. So networking is a critical tool to our business. That's pretty much established, in my opinion anyway, through a lot of travel and face-to-face meeting. Even though I live in Australia, ordinarily when there's no COVID, I spend 5 months of the year traveling, and that's throughout many territories, meeting clubs, meeting football directors, scouts, other agents, and constantly building upon my network, which over 30 years is quite expansive now. That comes at a great cost. Comes at a great cost in terms of time. If you have a family, it's a lot of time away from your family. There's a literal cost in terms of the money that it costs to keep traveling at those rates. But that's the groundwork that you need to invest in your business and invest in yourself to be successful. Again, I keep coming back to the point that it's a patience thing when you build a successful business. A lot of people reference successful stories of, an agent who's come across a very talented young player who has transferred or sold for tens of millions. That is an exception. That's not the norm as to what happens for the 13,000 agents and intermediaries around the world. It's like every mother who rings me and compares her son to Leo Messi. Nobody ever rings me and compares their son to anybody different. It's always Leo Messi or Ronaldo. So they are the two exceptions. It's not clear to be able to compare those guys. And so similar in our business, while there are a small cartel of agents who are extremely successful and make an enormous amount of money, there's tens of thousands of agents who don't make as much money as that and do struggle and have difficulties. So it's important to just be mindful. We tend to pick on those exceptions a lot of the time. It's generally a business as well that I think you will have a lot more success if you surround yourself with the right people. That's certainly my lessons over 30 years. In every country and every territory that I work, I surround myself with the best lawyers, the best accountants, the best advice all the time. Yes, it is costly, but it is well worth it in the long run. When you have the best advice, ultimately that helps you as well to present yourself as a serious person in business. It helps to present yourself as a serious agent. And ultimately, and most importantly, the advice that you then pass on to your clients, your players, is absolutely tops. The players are an important part of building your business also, as I'm sure many of you who have been in the business for a while are aware. Because in a changing room, when there's a squad of 20, 23 players, they'll talk to each other. And if you're doing a fantastic job for your client and your player, that's going to spread throughout the changing rooms. And when players are thinking about changing agents, they will hear and see that you've done a great job for your client. And that's how you build your client base. And again, that taps into using all the right people and having good advice around you. With obviously the changes to rules and regulations, of which we're about to enter the last phase in negotiations with FIFA, having a good team around you will help you navigate those changes as well, because it may prove some difficulties for some businesses. But again, good advice, surround yourself with good people will help you to get through those initial speed bumps, if you like, when the rule changes probably next July. But in general, that's the things I have found over 30 years that have helped me to stay in the business for a long time. I've watched an awful lot of agents come and go in that period of time. Some agents get seduced, obviously, by getting into deals and doing things that are outside of the rules and regulations. I often tell people that most of the guys who do that have a very short span in this business. That may be very short-term success, and not one of them has ever made enough money to retire. So it's a very short-term thing. Stay within the rules and regulations, use good people, build your networks, and again, manage your clients' expectations. That's a key to keeping clients over a long period of time, because there's a high turnover of agents and clients at sort of the lower end of the industry. And that's generally down to agents signing players, making huge promises that they can't actually manage or keep. And as soon as that happens, then the player just moves on. And also, as I referenced earlier, the player tells other players that that's what's happened to him. So his experience of you is a bad one. That gets passed on, and that just passes on and on and on. So they're pretty much most of the things that I could suggest to you from my experience anyway, that I would suggest that you stick to give yourself a good chance. And it's like any other business. There's no replacement for hard work. That's what we tell the players. It's the same for the agents. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And there's no doubt that in this business, luck plays a part. 100% it does. But again, I always feel the harder you work, the luckier you get. But they're basically sounding boards, in my opinion, based on my experience.
Thank you,
Shall
Paddy.
I field questions, Michael? Is that the next?
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Michael. Should I take questions, or is that the next step?
Yeah, I personally want to ask some certain questions. So, and as you are from Australia, is there any relationship between African and Australia in terms of football business?
Yeah, a lot of our top young talent now in the Australian A-League are all African players. They're of African origins who have moved here. So they've, made a lot of people aware of the talent of African footballers. Like I said to you, I think almost the whole world agrees that African players are fantastic athletes, and they're high potential prospects. Here, a lot of our top young players are of African origin, and there's more and more coming through all the time here. But just to clarify, Michael, I live in Australia, but I'm actually Irish, so I come from Europe.
All right, thank you. And also, before we take a question from our guest online, what can an African agent do to meet up with the kind of football they played in Australia? We have our African players.
The league.
We can see the African players flood the leagues in Europe.
African players because they're also powerful and quick. Sorry, Michael, you just broke up.
Yeah, so I think we can see African players flood all the leagues in Europe. Can such happen in Australia too?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Oh, for sure. Like I say, the guys who have immigrated here have done very well, and that's made Australian clubs very aware of the potential of them.
Now, for the benefit of the newly licensed agent in Africa, how can they connect with Australian agents? How can they meet up with you guys from Australia?
Multiple ways. You can go obviously to Football Australia's website, and there's a list of intermediaries and agents listed there. And so you can contact them. They should all have a telephone number, an email address on there. So you can connect with them through there. Peter's organization as well, the Australian Football Agents Association. There will be quite a lot of the agents will be members of Peter's group. But yeah, I mean, most intermediaries and networking, people will go to the Football Association of that country's website, and they will be able to see a list of intermediaries. I mean, obviously in some countries it's difficult. If you go to the English website, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So it's pretty difficult to decipher who to contact out of all of that number. The Australian one, you may find, I'm guessing maybe 40 to 50, so it's a lot easier.
Wow. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's take a question from the Congress here. Do anyone have question here?
Yes.
Okay, grade 3. You're on.
Okay, Mr. Paddy.
Yep.
Okay, my name is Yakubu. I would like to ask you one simple question. When collaborating with another agent from another country, what should we look out for?
What I would always look for in my time is I would try to find information on that agent on the internet. I'm looking for reputable partners all the time. I think we all know that in this industry, there are some partners in certain places that are not reputable. it's very important that you find a reputable partner, because again, if a deal goes bad, normally in the client's eyes, that will reflect bad on you, Yakubu. So it is important to find a reputable partner. You want a partner who has contacts, genuine contacts to the people that he says he does. I always look for a track record. If I look at an agent, I try to look at deals he's done in the past with clubs, to, I suppose, validate that his record is correct and real. But that's the biggest problem facing us, and it's not an easy problem, Yakubu, especially for young agents who are starting out. It's a big difficulty. You know, a lot of people at the moment, they use mandates to try and protect themselves in these deals. This will be a big part of our negotiations with FIFA shortly, about the whole role of mandates, because strictly speaking, the vast majority of mandates are not that legal. They're very, very sketchy at best. So mandates are not necessarily an absolute 100% guarantee. Over time, the short answer for Yakubu is when you work with a partner for a period of time, you get to build a trust and a relationship, and you know you can trust that person. But again, that takes time. That doesn't solve a immediate one-on-one deal.
All right, thank you. Anyone with question? What in the absence? Okay, grade 3. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, you have to unmute, grade 3. Yakubu, you're on mute.
Yakubu, unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. What do we do? For example, I've been in the business also for a while now, and I'm not based in Africa, and we used to have a lot of African or other partners. What do we do in a situation whereby many players are engaged with another agent and try to engage with new one? What do we do?
Well, an agent has a legal representation contract with a player, he's protected by that. Obviously, you have the ability to take disputes to resolution chambers. There's certain protections under FIFA. Obviously, lawyers in common law are able to help you with that scenario. That's a common problem, Yakubu, that arises with mandates, is that frequently players and their representative will sign multiple mandates, and clubs are as I constantly try to educate the players, this is not a good situation for the player, because if I'm a club and 5 agents come to me with a player, and one agent wants 500,000 and another one 450 and another one 400, etc. As a club, who do you think I'm going to do a deal with? I'm going to do a deal with the agent who is asking for the least amount of money for the player. So that is not good for a player. That's actually really bad. But some players, they're convinced the more agents, and that may be the case. But fundamentally, when too many people are out mandated by a player, it leads to large complications, lack of trust with the club, because it doesn't look good for the agent in the eyes of the club, doesn't look good for the player in the eyes of the club. But fundamentally, because why would the club want to pay more than they have to for a player? But generally speaking, it's if you have a proper representation contract with your player, you're protected by that, or you should be protected by that in almost every territory and under FIFA law.
Thank you very much. In addition to my question, because I've encountered so many challenges in order, like, for example, I got a player from Africa or somewhere, they told me they are party anymore.
Sure.
So what should I do?
In that instance, Yakubu, if you have a contract with that player, you'll have a date on your contract, right? If that player has subsequent to that date signed another contract, you then. So it's illegal for the player. So then you would go to the member association of the country involved. You would lodge a commending again on the member association if they have whatever their dispute resolution that they have in that particular member association. But also legally, you would have a challenge. Just in common law, if you have a contract and the player signed one behind your back later on, the dates on your contract will demonstrate that you were the first legal representative, and most likely in your contract it will say that you're his exclusive agent. Unless your contract allows that player to go and sign with another agent that you're not exclusive, that's probably the only way you can do it. But also there's certain countries. So in Germany, for example, they don't recognize the right for a player to have an exclusive contract with an agent. He can have as many representations in Germany as he wishes. So in Germany, you would have no protection from that situation. But in most countries, you will have protection.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, hello, Paddy.
Hello, Tony.
Yeah, I think that was very, very insightful. Thanks, man. Thanks very much. I want to ask a question. Now, you've explained about the contract situation, the non-exclusivity and the exclusive contract. Now, what happens with players that are registered with clubs and they have already registered these players in the TMS system and they've tagged this player to other agents? How do you manage that kind of situation?
Could you just repeat that a little bit? Sorry, you just broke up.
Okay.
Just, can you speak a little bit slower?
Okay. So now you have situations where you have players that have that have already been entered in the TMS system by other clubs and they've been tagged to other agents. So how do you go about this kind of scenario?
So sorry, Tony, if I'm trying to understand your question. The player is being what in the system by clubs? Yes,
and you want to engage the player. The player says they are free players, they are free agents, and then you get to find out that they have already been filed into this TMS system and they'll be tagged with another agent, another intermediary. How do you manage that kind of situation?
Again, I think if I understand you correctly, Tony, it's very difficult. One of the big issues that we are currently in negotiations.
What he's trying to say is, he's trying to engage with the player, and the player has been registered on a particular club TMS, transfer machine system. So, in the registration on the TMS, they tie the player with an intermediary. Right.
Yes.
So
right. So
it's now
trying to engage the player, but he's already signed up officially with another agent. How do you go about engaging the player? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So in the upcoming rules and regulations as they are today, Tony, FIFA are going to say that you cannot approach that player within a certain time period, and that is being argued at the moment. Somewhere between 6 to 12 months is what is being bandied back and forth. The short answer is it's very hard to, from our perspective, it's very difficult to manage that. It's very difficult to enforce rules in that area. Again, in certain territories, like I mentioned earlier, in Germany, you could speak to the player anytime. In other territories, you can't really protect against players speaking to agents if an agent wants to speak to them. It's a very common thing. It's very common at the top end of the game. It's common throughout the whole game. So probably there will be rules and regulations, to try to protect that to a certain degree, because again, we argue at FIFA that from you. So we are trying to find protection for agents, as well as find a system that allows a player not to be trapped in a relationship that he doesn't want to be in, and that's where FIFA Pro come in very heavily. So there'll probably be some rules that say you can't approach a player within a certain period of time. Outside of that, you can speak to the player, present yourself, your services, what you feel you can do. what you might be able to offer better than his current representation. But there will be some legislation, I think, coming out about that. How they police it, what sanctions there are. Hi, Michael.
Yeah, my name is Michael. My name is Michael. I'm actually a Nigerian, but I live presently in the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
I am also a new agent presently. Now, I've been trying to see how to, you said something in your initial presentation about collaboration. I've been having a whole lot of problem collaborating. Reasons are because I keep trying to meet these agents, sometimes write them an email. In fact, I've called several of them. Call them on phone, introduce myself, and then my license number to them. But you find that they'll say, okay, please send an email to us, which I often do, but I don't get a response from them. you understand that, right? So I keep wondering, like you said, I need a whole lot of network build up. In fact, that's the reason why I'm in this very web Zoom meeting. I want to see how I can build up and do a whole lot of things. But I realize that the established agents, sometimes it's so difficult to really break through them, So what's further advice do you think someone like me and others who are also fairly new will have to do? Thank you.
Yep. Michael, there's no, I suppose, real answer to that. It is extremely difficult. Even in PROFAA, that's a huge issue raised by many of our members. That's part of the reason, I suppose, that they join PROFAA, is to network through an association by being part of it. It's very difficult, and there's no simple answer to that. I know many agents starting out, building a business, try to get in contact with more established agents. It's really just up to the established agent as to whether they connect or not. I personally am old school. I always try to get face-to-face meetings with people. But again, that's not so easy because you can ask and they might not. One of the things I preach to all the new agents or young agents starting out is it's persistence. And that's why the very beginning I said patience is a huge key. And it's not easy to say that because you face so many hurdles. I would say if you're starting out, then you try not to go to the largest possible agents. You probably try to find, some of the newer agencies, younger agencies or agents, and try to build slowly from there because, you can get to meet someone and he knows someone else. And so on the back of those kinds, I suppose it's kind of try to find people at your level, form a network there. And as a group, you can build and build and build. And you'd be very surprised at the people who know people. Networking is just, it's having a cup of coffee, meeting them, chatting, seeing where it leads. And it's almost like an old door-to-door salesman. You might knock on 99 doors and get a no, but on the 100th, you'll get a yes. And that might be very well worth your while. But there's no easy answer. I get emails all the time. The ones I don't respond to, Michael, is not, I try to be very courteous and respond as much as I can to every single email. But I work for myself. I don't have lots of staff. So if I don't, it's only because time. It's not.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Paddy, just one last question, Paddy.
Sure, Tony.
Wow, I really can feel the frustration for my friend there. That's the same frustration I've been feeling all along, and you just keep writing emails and they don't respond. So, but what I've decided to do is I've decided to let me just put it to you. Let's see if you can probably advise on this. I've decided to profile all the different kind of stakeholders that are involved in the football business. Sometimes if you respond, is it based on your experience? Is it easier to rather like talk to club directors or talk to people that are directly linked to the clubs, or how is that route a route that is possible? Is that route a route that is tenable? Like trying to engage the club directly?
Look, Tony, that's the same as, and sometimes that's the answer to Michael's earlier question, that I will, if I have a good player, a good prospect, maybe I don't need to go to another agent. Maybe I try to engage the club directly. I mean, that's what scouting departments are there for. More and more in scouting departments, you know, they're bigger now, so there's more staff in them. They can check things out. But bear in mind, the clubs are getting thousands of emails, little clips of footage, sometimes big clips of footage. So it's very difficult for them to just sit and look at every single one and respond to it. I mean, in my own personal business, I probably get about 60 emails a week coming from Africa. And sometimes they put clips on that are like 18 minutes long, and I can't sit through an 18-minute clip. And I respond to as many as I can. So that's just me. Can you imagine then any they get? So if you can, you go, but again, you don't try to go necessarily engage with the football director or the CEO. You should try and identify who the scouts are, maybe even guys in the under 23s, under 18s, etc. They might be easier entry points into the clubs than going too high, because again, the guys at the top end have a lot of information coming in every day, a lot to tackle. So you try to find the easiest entry point to build a relationship. And again, sometimes it's the assistant under 18 coach at a team, and then he's been, and he can help introduce you, and you can slowly start to build a network. Phones.
Anyway, all right, thank you.
Okay.
So hard to.
Hello, Paddy. Can I just ask a very simple question?
Okay, shall I?
I just want to put it directly to you, that what will you be looking for in a young intermediary? If you are to be like you as an established intermediary, what exactly will you be looking for?
Look, my advice, Solid, to most young intermediaries starting out, and have another stream of income, a job, whatever, something that brings money in while they're building their business, because it is a tough business, and there are a lot of agents and intermediaries and rest of things that there's a significant cost to all of that. If you want to do it properly and full time, you'll need an established group of clients. You'll need some of those clients will need to be of a certain value to bring you a certain amount of money to be able to do it full time. So again, it's a patience thing, and it's probably keeping a stream of income so you're not uncomfortable in your personal life, and just building up until you say, hey, you know what, I've got a group of net worth. But yeah, I always say to them, it's a patience trip. A lot of young agents normally that I see, after about maybe 6 to 9 months, they tend to get fed up. They can't, mentioned earlier, they can't seem to break in, and they get frustrated and they leave. And also because sometimes they do it full time from the very beginning, and they just literally run out of money because everyone has bills to pay, right? So yeah, I think so. It's slow and steady. Don't throw every single thing at it starting out. Try and be sensible, and again, finding the right entry points and building up bit by bit. You're on mute, Michael. You're on mute, Michael. I think Michael, are you there?
Okay,
Michael Sodeke,
All
are you
right.
there? Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question.
So
All right,
what
I have
I'm
a question
trying to
too,
say-
still.
So hold on, Steven. What I'm trying to say is for you to get connected, I mean, to have connection in this business, you will need to attend seminars, conference, a webinar like this, where you can meet a lot of people in terms of the business. And if you are sending an email, especially to me, if you send email, you send message, and I didn't reply you, you have to develop the spirit of non-relentless. So you keep sending those emails. One day, you will get a reply from the likes of Paddy and Peter, all the big men in the business of football. So that's just it. So before we move on to the next speaker.
Can I just say one last thing, Michael, if
Okay,
you don't mind? The other thing, when you approach people as a point of difference for you, so for example, if you make a connection with somebody, maybe you've started out and you don't do some young player, don't gain attention. If you've had some young players that have played in your national under-19s, under-20 sides, whatever, those are the types of things that will get attention from some of the agents that you're maybe trying to break through to, but they will want to see that you have something, that you're not just speculating with nothing whatsoever to offer, because again, they get approached by many people, and bear in mind, as many people as contact them from Africa are contacting them from South America, Asia. Half the world's population, or more than that, is in Asia, and they all have the same interests and try to break in as well. So try to bring something with you, a relationship of some sort, some track record, and that will get attention, and highlight why it is that they should speak to you and what you can bring to them. That will help you, I think.
thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, we are moving to the next speaker now. Jonathan, are you on?
Hi there, Michael. You all right?
Yeah. You
Want me to
welcome.
start straight off then?
Yeah, you are going to talk to us on how we can do business in England, how African agent can do business in England. So we have 30 minutes.
Right. What I've actually prepared is to give you a bit of an introduction to how things actually work and the steps that African agents need to go through, and agents for even if they're in England and Great Britain themselves and around the world. So
You can put it together.
Is it possible to share a screen, Michael?
Yes. Okay. Let me allow it. It's done.
Okay.
You can go ahead.
So hopefully everybody can. Maybe. A minute. There we go. Everybody
Yes,
see
we're on now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Yes, we
Thank
see
you.
it.
Right. So basically what I've tried to put together is to give you an overview of the steps that agents and intermediaries will need to go through in England.
Okay.
In terms of a lot of the tips that Paddy's already shared, which I wholeheartedly agree with, it's no different to an extent from one country to another. And even though everybody sees England because of the Premier League and the profile it gets on that, a lot of the problems that we experience are the same as everybody else. It's just on a bigger scale, like Paddy touched on, you know, contacting agents. The list of agents in England alone isn't just hundreds now, it's thousands and always has been. In England. So for the purposes of this presentation, I've just focused primarily on the FA. The FA, the Football Association of England, they are called the FA due to historic elements within on that they are considering changing their name to the English FA. So as far as English intermediaries go now to register to operate in England, English FA, the FA, it's all done online now. I have heard that they've taken some written applications, but generally most people do it online. There's a one-off registration fee of £250, which works out about $340 and then an annual fee on top of that of another £250, which is paid every year. If an intermediary fails to renew their registration with the English FA after a month, they must re-register. So they've got to pay the initial fee again and register once again. And as I said, there's thousands of intermediaries in England now. Some of them are long established, some of them are new, some of them, dare we say, were unlicensed agents before and are now registered intermediaries because the process is easier. But the question is, what are the benefits and the returns of being registered and authorized? There's a big argument that those who are unregistered are not regulated. To develop and establish yourself if you are registered. It's okay for those people who've been floating the rules and regulations for a long time because they've built up, as Paddy explained, networks and their standing and their player rosters to. But I would say it's still better off for anybody trying to get into the industry to be registered. Now, note, registering in England doesn't permit you to operate in other countries, despite what some people think and say. If you look to work with players under the age of 18, between the ages of 16 and 18 in England, you also need to get permission to represent those players. That involves what we call a DBS check in England. It's a criminal record check. Other FAs also do it around the world. Some do, some don't. Now, this might be quite complicated for somebody who doesn't live in England, hasn't lived in England, and isn't of British nationality. By the FA. What I would say to anybody, if you're working with players under the age of 18, make sure if you're working in England, you've got permission to work with those players. This is a favour suspending, they are fining intermediaries left, right, and centre. People who think they're doing the right thing, but they haven't sought this extra permission on top of the license, on top of their registration to ages of 16 and 18. As we all know, below 16, no go. Don't even try it to do it in England, because not only the FA, but other authorities will try it. There are standard representation agreements. I know somebody asked the question about mandates to Paddy earlier. The line of the English FA, and has been for as long as I can remember, you take a complaint to them, they will say, sorry, we can't do anything, we're not interested. We do not recognise mandates. Okay? A lawyer might say something different on a legal argument, but the English FA will state time do have standard representation agreements. There's representation agreements for representing players. If you're representing a club, and which for me is the closest thing you will get to a mandate that the English FA will recognise. So that's a subcontracting agreement. And are available to download, to go through. What I would say is that they are the basic templates. It's always advisable, if you want something that is best for you as the agent and intermediary, and for the client, seek out the proper legal advice to edit these to where you want them. These are basic. They're better than most agreements, but the other thing is as well, these have terminology in them that the FA specify must be in all their registered agreements, whether you're representing a player or a club or multiple parties. But they are there on the website. They're not brilliant, but they're a good starting point. When you have these agreements, and this is crucial, make sure you register them, because if the English FA haven't got them, the legal argument is that you've still got an agreement signed by the client, whether it be a player, but the FA don't know you've got that. Make sure it's registered, it's uploaded via their online system. Again, sometimes they will process a hard copy of a document or an emailed agreement, and that usually happens when it's a player not recognised in their system. So with a player who's never played in England or the UK before, or never been on FIFA's TMS at any point, that they will probably need a hard copy agreement. Now I say this because there's many cases of duplicate agreements. Paddy mentioned that there's cases of duplicate mandates. Well, there are reports of the English FA's own registration system taking multiple agreements for the same player from different agents. Now, how do they decide which agreement is valid? They may well take it on the first date, which one they receive first. They may take it based on the date it was signed. So I would say when you register an agreement with the English FA, contact them, check it's registered, check they've recognised it, because as I said, there's many reports of multiple agreements. And no matter how many times players are warned not to sign multiple agreements with multiple agents, it still happens. And they will be left liable for any costs. because despite what the FA says, it's still a legally binding agreement that they've signed with multiple parties. Disputes in England, if you have a dispute with another agent, a player or a club solely within England, you have to go through what's called a Rule K arbitration process. My recommendation on this is avoid it wherever you can. It can take a lot of time. It can be expensive. The way to avoid it is good agreements, those good representation agreements, those good contracts with your clients, good legal advice. And if you do end up with a dispute, try and settle it, because this can take a long time. From my experience, it's not worth claiming anything less than $20,000, because you will pay more in arbitration fees than you will in the reward from it. It's not like a court case, it's arbitration. Legal barristers sit independently, they listen to the cases, and they make a decision, who's right, who's wrong, who's due what. And that's the process. Avoid it would be my recommendation. Obviously, very important thing at the moment, a lot of information going around with regards to work permits and working in England and the UK. The work permit situation with regards to footballers and coaches and managers and even club executives has changed since the UK voted to, as a whole, voted to leave the European Union. So there's a new visa system in place for footballers and football staff working in the UK. It's called a governing body endorsement, and it is awarded in England, again, by the FA. They have the authority of the UK government to award. Some people say the new system is worse. Some people say it's fairer. I actually think it's fairer to non-European staff, because before we would get a lot of substandard European players when there were a lot of players from North America, South America, Africa, Asia, who weren't getting a look in just because they weren't in the European Union. There's two versions. There's a temporary permit, and there's a more permanent one for a maximum of 3 years. Okay. The important thing to stress with this is that it applies to players, managers, coaches, assistants, directors of football, performance managers, and playing staff. But as far as players go, it also applies to trials. It applies to friendlies. It applies to training. And even though some people might think, oh, well, it's worth the gamble, get the player in for a trial, don't, because if it's found out, and even if the player is good, the chances are the permit will be turned down when it goes through an official process. This is the job of the club to sort out. The clubs are the sponsoring organisations. They should be sorting this out, and this applies to Premier League, English Football League, Women's Super League, and those top tiers of English football. So any activity deemed as working not just transfers, this still applies. And what they must seek is 15 points to get a work permit to be a footballer. And not as complicated as they used to be. You've got your international appearances. Then that takes into account the national team ranking. So the team for whom applies to play international football for will affect his points. The the league position of his last club, the level of the last club, their progress in continental competition, their previous work permits and certificates, if they've been granted any. The big one to note with, and I would say safe one, essential. And how they measure that is that they will take experts' opinion whether that player meets a certain standard, that he is outstanding, she is outstanding to play in England, that it raises the standard. Quite often, if a club wants a player enough under the old system, they will go to an appeal process, an exemptions panel, and a lot of the time they will be successful. If they don't think they will get a permit, they will the player in, sign them, and immediately loan them out. I've been in that situation myself, where players have come in from Africa, South America. The clubs really rate them. They sign them, and then they loan them out to a country or a club where they will get a work permit. That endorsement, that will, just one player comes to mind. How would I feel about this? This is a scary experience. Yes, it can be exciting, but I believe it's the agent's job to make sure the player is happy and aware of the possibility that, yes, they're signing for this club, but they could be going somewhere else. And it's the agent's job to make sure that's right. So main tip with work permits with regards to England, try and understand the system. It's very difficult. The clubs should have the resources and the knowledge. Notice I said should. And be realistic. Because if you've got a player who hasn't played top level in his home nation, has never even bring him. Quite simple, straightforward. If he's an outstanding young talent, he's featured several times for, say, the under-21s, under-23s, and a club in the Premier League really, really wants him, they will find a way, if not immediately, to get him a governing body endorsement. Loan him out, monitor him, and then look at going through that work permit, that endorsement at some point in the future. Reiterating what Paddy said is that building out agents and club directors and in general, agents and club directors for various reasons and managers are probably the least likely people in an email. I'm a bit like Paddy. I like to pride myself that if somebody takes the time to personalize, and I don't mean just shove my name in where somebody else's name should be, an email or a letter to me, I will try and respond. I think it's safe to say we're probably rare in that sense in this industry. Paddy, I'll trump you on 60 emails a week. I'm probably well into three figures. I probably get between 120 and 150 a week of some sort of agent, club, scout, player, parent of player emails every week. And it's just impossible to respond to all of them. If they personalize it and make it a bit different, then I will do my damnedest to try and respond. But as far as building that network, these are the sort of people that clubs in England, top flight clubs, will use. And you're not just looking at managers and head coaches and assistant coaches. Look to the scouting networks. The scouting networks are huge. But the difference in England, a lot of English clubs have don't employ as many scouts anymore. They have a lot of freelancers who are out there looking at players. Be aware that some of those freelancers like to think they're agents. But you can build your network far beyond the managers, scouts, analysts. This thing called the new one, Loan and Pathways Manager. They are the guys who are responsible for looking after players, and we're talking 16 to 23 potentially. And their job is to make sure that those lads who aren't getting games with their clubs are loaned out to the right clubs. So they're worth knowing. There's so many people, the player care managers, the player liaison officers, who, when a player signs for a club, there's a lot of work that they do behind the scenes with either their families or language training or whatever. They're worth knowing. There's more people than just those well-known elements within football that you can build your network with. English football, along with a lot of football, is big business. You don't need telling that. I've touched briefly on whether you're licensed or unlicensed, registered or unregistered, and you really have to consider, is it worth taking the risk? Could it hinder you in the future? There's a lot of people who've made very successful careers as, I hate people, agents, who have never been licensed or weren't until the licensing got a lot easier. They potentially look at it that the regulations are a hindrance. It restricts what registered and licensed, who don't see it as a hindrance and can quite happily go on with it. There's a lot of people pretending to be agents and intermediaries. They can go by certain names. Some will call themselves scouts, some will call themselves agents, some will call themselves trainee agents. There's no such thing as a trainee agent in England. Please, please believe that. Some will tout themselves as brokers, as fixers. They're the ones who might make deals happen by bringing parties together. But the other thing to be aware of, these brokers and fixers can quite often be breakers. You're trying to do something, you're working really hard, you're thinking it's all going, and all of a sudden somebody crops up you've never spoken to, you've never heard of, players never heard of, and they're trying to get involved. That's when your good legal advice comes in. Be aware of it. Be aware of it. That's what I would say. And the thing is, payments to agents from clubs in England will go via the FA clearinghouse. We're not allowed to call it a bank because it doesn't have a banking license, although there are people arguing that they operate it like a bank. But if you are paid by a club or paid by a club on your payments, if payments don't go via the FA, yeah, people might well start asking questions. It's just there to be aware of. I think I'm right in saying, Peter or Paddy will back me up on FIFA, is that FIFA will have a clearinghouse that will process payments, and in time that will include agents' payments as well. It might not be immediate, but that will be for international transfers. The FA clearinghouse is only for those transactions where you're dealing in England. The English agents hugely, absolutely massively at the moment, especially on things where it's duality. If you are representing a player, be aware certain situations, if you're representing a player coming to England and a club turn around and say to you, I'll tell you what, player won't pay you, we'll pay you 100% of what you're due. Be very careful. Tax evasion. Because the player and the club should be paying certain amounts of tax. Okay? Be very, very careful. And as Paddy said, surround yourself with the right people. Surround yourself with the right tax advisors, the right lawyers, the right accountants, that you're doing everything above board. A lot of agents aren't doing this deliberately. They just don't know. They just don't know that what they're doing is technically illegal. We're not talking football regulations. We're talking and one of the primary things is when you represent player and you represent the club, make sure you document and write down what you do for the club for your payments. It's a lot easier to prove what you do for the player, but if you do things for the club, document it. Keep your emails, keep your messages, whatever, just document it. Probably nothing will come of it, but the easiest thing in English football when it comes to agents is to target the smaller agents. And if they want to come down on the agents, the authorities will come down on the smaller ones first. Bribes and incentives and what we used to term brown envelopes, they are evident in English football. I'll say that quite openly. Peter knows how I like to stir the pot from time to time. Make payments to parents of players, family members. Be very, very careful. Be very careful. Again, it's a criminal offence for these bribes and unregulated payments. Yes, there's not many people being prosecuted yet in England, but it could happen. I just think people need to be aware. If you want to take the risk, that's a person's decision. But I think it's good that people are aware of what they should do or shouldn't do, as the case may be. So tips for success. When you've got the answers, can you tell me? Success for me is different for each and every person. And when people come to me and they say, I want to be an agent, I say, well, why? What are your reasons? Why do you want to be an agent? What do you want to achieve? Some say money. Some say love of the sport. Some say reputation. They're building a client roster, the huge wealth. And I think a lot of people are different. Don't ruin your reputation before you start. Again, Paddy mentioned Messi. I would say, do not send an email saying you've got the next Ronaldo. You can guarantee you will be marked as spam. You will not even get to the courtesy of a reply or somebody reading it. Be realistic. Say something different in the email. You know, have a look at what other people are doing if you can, and do something different. How you want to achieve your success. And again, everybody's different or are prepared to do it. You know, your morals, your ethics. Morals are different from one person to another. Your position in the intermediary world, do you want to just represent players or focus on representing players, which is where I come from. A coaching background and a teaching background. Do you want to be one of those brokers and fixers fixing the deals? Do you want to be a sort of scale independent? Do you want to work for a large agency? What I would say to you, when I first got into the industry, I made the mistake of approaching, well, I say mistake, of approaching the larger agencies. I got one reply, and the guy phoned me up with quite a few expletives, telling me, and I'd never do it. I'd never make a success of it, this, that, and the other. And you will get a lot of that. What I would say is that that fired me up more than ever, that somebody could behave in that manner. The one benefit from that, of all the other letters I sent out, I got a reply off an independent agent who remains a friend of mine today. The scary thing is I'd probably tell him more now about the regulations than he knows himself. But he remains a friend, and we're a network, and it might not be that we do much business together, but it can be very lonely if you're independent, very lonely. And when you've got people like that who can support you, that's great. Know when to gamble, when to stick, or when to walk away. There'll be many times when somebody's tempting you that something's going to happen and you have to make a decision. Am I going to stick with this? What's it going to cost me? Is it going to cost me a lot of time? Am I wasting my time? Do you stick to your principles? Do you stick to what you're doing? Do you stick